I recognize a lot of names here, but there looks like quite a few new people as well. We're well into our fourth year now of Crypto Mondays, and thank you for anybody for putting up with this when we called a holiday in July. And I think it's the classic summer season problem of speakers suddenly not being available, going on unexpected holidays and COVID and what have you. We are really looking forward to the time, hopefully in the not too distant future, where we can be meeting face to face in a proper networking event as we used to do. Our old venue is no longer available to us because that company has moved. So we are on the hunt for a new venue. Anybody have any ideas? Do let us know. I suspect between us we will find a suitable venue in which to meet. I think, I'm not going to predict specifically, but I would certainly hope by October, November, face-to-face networking events are viable. And I think our team is certainly keen to get back into that kind of environment. We have been around, as I said, for almost 4 years. I think the interest in what we're doing and in the broad crypto and blockchain space is simply growing exponentially every day. And moving to an event where we almost invariably always have speakers, I think has proven very successful. If people, one thing I would throw out, if people have any thoughts or ideas about speakers, people they know who might be interested in talking to the group, we're happy to consider anybody on any subject within the crypto blockchain space. What we're not looking for is somebody coming in to sell their business to us. If you're representing a business and you've got something to say about it, by all means, we'd like to hear it. But the real intention of this is to engage and educate and inform the collective group. And so far, it's been extremely successful, we feel. Francesco Renzi is joining us from Estonia tonight. Thank you, Francesco. He's the co-founder, excuse me, and chief executive of Superfluid. I'm not going to reread his bio. It's on the site. Everybody will have seen it or you wouldn't be here tonight. Oleg might have some more to add on that. And I'm going to pass you over to Oleg now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Terry. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reread it either. Just maybe a few words. Obviously, Francesco and me, we used to work out of the same office in London, which was a fantastic time. It was a crypto co-working space. And then over the last year and a half, I watched him and his co-founder, Michele, really built like an absolutely incredible new DeFi protocol called Superfluid. So I'm super excited to actually hear more from him about it. And in my mind, Superfluid is a form of Stripe for the crypto world. For my own company, CoinRow, I've been wondering for years now, how could we take recurring crypto subscription payments? And that's actually one of the use cases that Superfluid is able to address by making tokens and digital assets streamable. And if you're wondering what that actually means, I'm giving the floor over to Francesco to tell us more.
All right, well, thanks for the intro. It's very, humbling to hear you say that. I remember still the times when we were at that co-working space, not knowing what we were doing. And it's just great to meet you guys again. Hopefully next time in London over a pint. But here we are online. Online meetups are not as fun, as we all know. So I'm just going to do a bit of a monologue, but at the end, I'd really like if we turned it in as much of a conversation as Zoom allows. So it'd be great, for everybody to kind of hold your questions and then turn it into a conversation at the end. So I'll share my screen now. Bear with me. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep,
Yes, we can.
Nice. Okay, well, so I'm Francesco. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of Superfluid, and today I'm going to tell you a bit about what we do, but not so much because I want to sell my company, which I agree would make for a very boring presentation, but rather because I think what we're doing is very interesting. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise, and because I think it opens up a lot of new opportunities for crypto more in general. So the way we interpret it is very much as a base layer for new innovations. So what I'd like at the end is hopefully I've sparked some imagination and creativity in you.
Well, I don't know what's going on here with this thing.
New ideas.
Sorry, someone's not mute. Please.
Give this a try. I don't know how.
Okay. All right. So Superfluid, what we do at Superfluid are digitally native programmable cash flows. So cash flows, meaning, for example, streaming money, so money that can be transferred over time. And we want to do this with no capital lockup. So what this means is we want to make money stream because we want it to be more efficient, to move faster, not to
I
get.
gotta see if I can get it back up again. So I'm
Sure.
gonna here, maybe try this.
Guys, there's some background noise. Where's that coming from?
Sorry, I just moved him to the
Keep
waiting
going.
room. Keep going.
No worries. So we want to do all of these things. We want to make money streamable, and we want to do it on chain so that we can program stream into DeFi applications. So programmability is super important to enable that extra layer of creativity to actually be able to express itself. So why are we trying to build money with this new kind of streaming capability? Well, the reason is because we think actually digital money is broken. So we simply ported the way we think about money in the traditional sense, right? And we ported it to the digital realm. The same way all kind of first generation internet businesses are born, right? And what I mean when I say this is that if you think about it, the way our banks work and even the way the blockchain works is very similar to how paper ledgers used to work, right? We used to have a list of people and how much money we owed them, right? And this is exactly, or more or less, very similar to how our digital money works. But we believe that we can do better than this, right? The first version of internet businesses is never the final version. The first version of Netflix, you would order a video and they would ship it to your home, right? The next version of Netflix allowed you to stream video online, and it became a global, incredible business, right? So we think money still hasn't seen that 2.0 moment. So while obviously the blockchain is a great way to transfer value, if you think about it, even online, services flow in real time, right? So when you subscribe to a service, you start enjoying it immediately, but the payment is still delayed. The payment is still chunky, right? We pay once a month. Now, why is it that, I subscribe to Netflix, I can watch videos all the time, any time of the day, but I pay them at the end of the month? Now, why is there such a huge disconnect there? And is that something that we can change by changing the rules of how money works? And this is kind of what we're trying to do at Superfluid. So we are trying to build next generation money. So money that is more expressive, that enables these kinds of continuous relationships to be expressed in the money itself. And we do this through what we call continuous cash flows. So money that basically moves at the speed of time. So it keeps basically transferring itself over time the same way we experience services. Now, let's talk a second about what money streaming actually is. So it's the transfer of money from one account to another over time in a frictionless way. So what this means is that for the user, the experience is as close as possible to the way they experience anything, right? So when you start working for your employer, you sign a contract, then you're an employee, right? So that's the kind of experience we want to enable. When you sign up to something online, right, with a credit card, you give your credit card details once, and then they will bill you automatically. Now, obviously, in that case, you have an intermediary, right? And that intermediary is basically pulling money from your account. Now, in crypto, we don't really like that. So the way Superfluid works, but still enabling the same experience, is that you are actually pushing money from your account over time. So the moment you start a stream, money starts streaming out of your account into the account of the counterparty without there being any intermediary. And this is a very interesting way of paying for things because it directly links the value transfer, so getting the service, and the payment, right? And what this means is that if you stop paying, they'll immediately cut off your service. And if somebody cuts off their service, you can immediately stop paying them. And this is something that's never really been done before, right? So obviously, when you buy something, like if you buy a coffee, if you give someone cash, they give you back the coffee, there's no trust necessary. But with services, we're used to always having this delayed payment, right? So for example, you would work for someone and then they'd pay you at the end of the month. But that first month you were working, you didn't really know if they would pay you at the end. And this causes a lot of troubles, right? Everybody has had the experience where they didn't get an invoice paid, or maybe it was simply delayed, right? And all that month of services was provided without payment. Or maybe the opposite, where you pay something at the beginning of the month, but then the service isn't provided. Now, by paying everything every second, we completely eliminate this. And this kind of fulfills one of the goals of the blockchain, which is reducing the need for trust in transactions, right? You can now start working for a company on the other side of the world where you don't know the founders, you don't even know what the company's called, but because they pay you every second, you don't need to trust them anymore. And this is one of the reasons we think payment streams are such an interesting way of transferring funds. Now, what is money streaming useful for? So it's useful for all sorts of recurring payments. So like Oleg was saying, subscriptions, that's a very big one, you know, on the online digital economy, most of the business models are built around subscriptions. Yet in crypto, we never really had a way to do those, right? So by enabling those, we think we can bring quite a lot of new monetization avenues to crypto businesses. Another very interesting use case, which is actually where we're focusing the most at the moment, is salaries. So salaries, obviously, you know, we're all used to very convoluted and complicated payroll processes, but actually it's simply a recurring payment, right? It's simply your employer paying you for your time. And in a world where we're moving to more decentralized teams across the world with less trust, right, remote teams, then paying salaries in crypto becomes a necessity. And paying them without needing to trust the counterparty is even more important. So we're seeing a lot of teams that are starting to adopt Superfluid payments for their workers. And obviously, DeFi enables a lot of new opportunities if you bring along a new way of moving the underlying assets. But I'll talk about that in a second. So how does Superfluid work? Basically, Superfluid works by creating a new thing we call super tokens. Super tokens are an extension of the ERC20 standard on Ethereum, which basically enables what we call real-time functionalities. And these are called agreements, and they're basically long-term financial connections between accounts. Now, the simplest is the one I was explaining, which is money streaming, where basically, as a user, you agree to transfer to another user a certain amount of currency every second, right? Now, what we do is we store the information about this agreement on chain. And then by using the stored information and the blockchain's clock, we calculate a user's balance every second. Now, as a result of this, when you open MetaMask, every time the block creates a new timestamp, your balance will change, right? So effectively, we have what looks like a balance that's always changing without actually needing to make any transactions. So as a user, you only have one transaction at the beginning. This transaction tells the blockchain what you agree to, right? How much money you agree to spend. And after this, your balance updates automatically. So it's a very good user experience, and it doesn't require any interactions from the user, which means, you know, obviously it scales without needing the user to really be online or do anything complicated. They simply need to have money in their wallets, and the money will flow. So Superfluid enables other agreements. You can check more on our website, but at the moment, streaming money is kind of the biggest thing that we're doing. So another very important thing is programmability. Now, programmability is what made the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? It's what enabled DeFi by enabling more complex use cases to be built on chain. So it was very important for us at Superfluid to enable this. And the way this looks at the moment is that you're able to create smart contracts that react to streams. So if you open a stream to a smart contract, which is what we call a super app, it will be able to trigger custom logic. And this means you are able to connect to this app's balance and create kind of financial relationships that go on over time without necessarily giving custody of your funds to that application. And this is very different to how we use applications at the moment. Like if you're familiar with Aave or Uniswap, they all operate in one instant, right? When you transfer funds, that's when things happen. In the case of Superfluid, you can start a relationship with an app where you start transferring funds, and then funds will transfer to that app over time and will keep transferring until you stop that stream. So we believe this is a completely new paradigm for DeFi, right? You pause from doing very slow interactions where you have one transaction and then maybe you go back to an app a month later, you have another interaction, to having what we call real-time finance. So opening streams, continuous transfers, and basically creating relationships that last for a long time between you and financial applications. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of financial applications that can be built with streams. We're just starting to scratch the surface. Honestly, we don't even know where the biggest use cases are going to be. At the moment, we're mostly focusing on kind of simple payments. So as I was saying, salaries, subscriptions. But I think as more money enters the Superfluid network, as more people start using Superfluid for streams, we'll come up with new ideas and new things that it can be used for. So some ideas that we've had, but we're still seeing people implement very slowly. For example, our streaming exchanges. So the idea here would be that you basically can transfer over time from one currency to another, right? One example could be an employee which is in a different country with a different fiat currency and a company that has their treasury in dollars, right? Maybe they decide to pay $1,000 a month, but the counterparty receives it in their own currency. Or a savings account where that counterparty who is receiving a stream is able to stream the money in, right? So as they receive their salary, maybe they can allocate 20% of that to be saved immediately. Now, with Superfluid, you don't have to ever withdraw the funds. So as you receive them, you can actually spend them. The funds don't have to stay in your account. You don't have to do any operations. So you can effectively automate your income by creating outgoing streams. So imagine you're receiving $1,000 a month. You can send $500 to a savings account, and maybe $500 you can swap for a different currency. Cash flow advances are something we're very excited about. It's basically uncollateralized lending, right? So it's not backed by assets like, put Ether, borrow DAI, like most of DeFi works, but rather it's a loan backed by your future income, right? So imagine, for example, CoinRule starts using Superfluid for their subscriptions, and they have $10,000 a month of subscriptions. They could, for example, borrow $50,000, and whoever gives them the loan would then own that cash flow. So they would receive the money until the loan is repaid, right? And this is something that traditional businesses sometimes get access to, but only when they're really big, because for financial institutions, it doesn't make sense to give this kind of credit to small players. But with DeFi, obviously, the barriers to create these kinds of financial products become much lower. So we're very excited to see if anybody's able to crack this and bring credit to very small organizations or even individuals. Continuous auctions are a very interesting concept. If anybody wants to go down that rabbit hole, it's the idea of basically paying for something, basically continuously selling something at to the highest bidder. One interesting application for this is to do continuous ICOs. So I don't know if you all remember ICOs in 2017. It was all, you had to get in immediately, and then as soon as it dropped, you would have the servers crash and everybody would try and buy at the same time. But that's generally bad for businesses because they're probably selling their equity too cheap. With continuous auctions, you could basically cap how much you're issuing and issue only a certain very small percentage every hour. And users would be able to basically pay as much as they feel for that amount of tokens. So a lot of different ideas. There's different people in our community that are working on it. If anybody in here is a developer, please go to hack.superfluid.finance and you can have a look at some other ideas and some stuff that's been built. And if you want to try any of these applications, there's an application called Ricochet. So this is not built by us. It's a community project. So I can't say how good it is. I'm trying it at the moment. And this is basically a DCA product. So if you've been in the crypto space for a while, you've probably heard about dollar cost averaging. So this is basically the idea that if you're not a trader, you shouldn't be trying to time the market, but rather you should just commit to a continuous buy in dollar terms. So the way Ricochet works, you open a stream of stablecoins to the Ricochet contract, and the Ricochet contract every hour at the moment makes a purchase of Ether on SushiSwap and distributes it to everyone who's streaming. So this is probably the most kind of short scale DCA you can do. And for a user, it's simply one transaction where they open the stream. So it's a really, really good UX. And if you're receiving your salary in a stream, you can basically redirect some of it to this app and never have to do any intermediate transactions, right? So you get your salary in DAI and you buy Ether continuously without doing anything. And this is kind of why I'm really excited about Superfluid, because it enables on-chain automations for recurring operations, right? Normally, this kind of thing would mean that you have to kind of log on every day and click a bunch of times on MetaMask to make things happen. But here it's completely automated and it goes basically streams out directly from your income. So these are some of the things I'm very excited about. I do think programmable money streaming will change the way the Web3 digital economy will look. I think companies in the crypto space are going to adopt this technology very rapidly, both for their income, so things like subscriptions, but also for the money they spend, right? So salaries and other things. And looking forward to see what kind of financial innovations our community comes up with. But so far, we've been very impressed by the kind of creativity we see. So that's it from me. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything that wasn't clear by my presentation?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Francesco. Thank you so much. So everyone, if you have questions, post them please in the chat and I can go first because I actually have quite a few things I would like to understand a little bit more. So you said you're basically like the way you make the token streamable is by effectively upgrading the ERC20 standard. But how does it work? Like, for example, let's say I want to stream a DeFi token, like let's say the Uniswap token. Is it basically, would it be like a Superfluid Uni, which then becomes streamable and then you hold somewhere the original Uni token, or?
Yes, exactly. So it's like a wrapper. Similar to how certain apps don't accept Ether and you have to wrap it into wrapped Ether first. So it's a similar process. It's a bit annoying if you only use it for one thing, right? So if you're getting paid your salary and you don't use any of these other apps, then you kind of have to unwrap it to use it in other apps. So that's not ideal. But the really interesting stuff happens when you have these connections, right? When you're receiving and sending at the same time, because then the unwrapping part is not that interesting. You don't really kind of have to do that as often. So that's the kind of UX we're aiming for.
Thank you. And we have a question from Chris Coyle. Can you put Superfluid in context? How well has it been taken up by the industry so far?
Sure. Well, we started working on this a while back, but we've only been live for, I'd say, 4 months right now. So the uptake is slow but steady. We're working. So there's a few issues, right? So first of all, we're kind of upending how money works, right? We're introducing this new concept of streaming, but that doesn't really marry very well with what we have right now. So we're focusing a lot on rebuilding a lot of stuff from scratch, right? And rebuilding applications takes time. So things are moving slowly, but we do have some applications that are coming up. And I think, for example, this Ricochet exchange has already got six figures in streamed money per month. And I think as we onboard more companies to pay salaries, these kinds of applications are going to get a lot of volume because there's not so many of them. And that in turn will attract more applications. So far, I think we have about a dozen companies paying salaries in streams, and we have a lot more that we're onboarding right now. So I'm quite optimistic, but we're still in early days.
Thank you. And then there's a question from Leslie. Can Francesco talk us through the customer experience from a user's point of view, e.g. buying ETH continuously?
Yeah, so basically, first of all, you would need some stable coins. Let's say you have some DAI, right? You, first of all, would need to upgrade that to the Superfluid DAI. And when you have that, it's literally one click. So you click on app.ricochet.exchange, and that will start your stream of DAI. And then a few minutes later, I think it's every hour actually. So once an hour, you will basically get some Ether. That's it. You don't have to do anything else as long as your balance is topped up, right? So depending on how much you're streaming, you might have to, top up your balance once a week, once a month. That's completely up to you. But if you have a lot of DAI, then you don't have to top up. So that kind of depends on you. But basically, as a user, it's one click. So a lot of we try to condense as much as possible into one transaction, so that as a user, you don't have to go back and do other operations.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question from Patrick Geyer. How do you ensure streams are funded without locking funds?
That's a very good question. I think the easy answer is that we don't ensure they're funded. So streams are liquid, so they can stop anytime. So I think the intuition we had is that it's not so important to lock the funds as long as you always have certainty that you're receiving the funds, right? So basically by streaming money, you are able to have a digital representation of a cash flow, which means you're either getting paid. So am I receiving money? Yes, no, right? It becomes a binary option. So you're either receiving money or you're not. And as a result, you can build a smart contract that knows if it's getting paid or not, even if the funds are not locked. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but happy to take it up maybe afterwards in our Discord.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a question from Giuliano Conti. On the recurring purchases, where do you see your advantage versus the various exchanges, i.e. Bitpanda or Revolut?
I mean, it's a completely different experience. Well, first of all, I guess I don't think either of those lets you buy as often, right? And with DCA, really, the more granular your purchases are, the better, because you're less likely to buy a top. You get paid. I mean, if you're receiving your salary as well, it's even better, right? Because then your payments net out as you receive them. You make the payments, and it kind of flows simultaneously. The money's on chain, which means you can quickly use it for other things. While if you were doing it on Revolut, it's just kind of a stale way of accruing money. But I guess it's all down to you, right, and what you want to do. Revolut is great. We use it sometimes. It's a good product. It's up to you. I think decentralized finance is generally better.
Thank you. And then actually one quick question from me also. What about gas costs? Like how is that handled?
So the gas cost is only there when you open a stream. After you've opened the stream, which means you told the smart contract how much to transfer. After that, the money just flows forever without any gas until you close the stream.
So it's a bit like a payment channel on a layer 2 solution in a way.
In a certain sense, yes, but it's not a payment channel. So in payment channel technology, basically what you're doing is you're locking money on chain and then you're taking it off chain. But then there are very complex rules that you have to always check yourself, right? So payment channels, in my opinion, never really took off because they make the user responsible for ensuring those rules. And this means that the user has to run, for example, in Bitcoin, a Lightning Network node. And if that node goes offline, they could actually lose the funds, even though they haven't spent them, right? And generally, I think it's bad practice to make your user operate something, right? Like it's in line with the crypto ethos, but it's very impractical, right? Nobody wants to run a server just to make sure they don't lose their money. As a result of this, I don't think the Lightning Network really took off, right? With Superfluid, it's all on chain. You don't need to be online. It's one transaction, then you can completely go offline and the money keeps flowing. So it's much easier on the user.
Thanks. And then there's a question from Chris Coyle. How do you get paid yourself as Superfluid owner? What customer charges are built in, and compare these to a typical bank?
So at Superfluid, we do partial. So we do a bit and the bits. But other companies that are not as ingrained in traditional systems as we are not, right? So we see people who are paying employees on the other side of the world purely using Superfluid. So it's really down to each company. We don't actually charge anything. So when you talk about customer charges, in the case of crypto, it's basically the initial gas cost to open a stream. We're available on the Polygon and XDAI sidechains, where the gas is basically zero. So effectively, you have no customer charges, unless, of course, you want to, swap that for fiat at some point, in which case you pay for whatever the exchange charges you. But Superfluid itself doesn't charge.
Thank you. And then there's a question from Temujin Louis. Hi, Francesco, thanks for your talk. Streaming tokens is a very interesting idea. You mentioned the concept is similar to a wrapped token. So when you issue a Superfluid token, where are the original assets held?
So first of all, we don't issue anything. We simply write the code for the protocol. When our users create wrapper contracts, so a wrapper for tokens, the contract itself is basically the one that's taking the original asset and then wrapping it into a new one. So that's basically each individual wrapper contract is holding the underlying assets to ensure redeemability of those assets.
Okay, and then we have another question from a user naming himself or herself price action TR. Actually, it's two questions. Let's start with the first. To set a loan, you need to convince your payers to set a stream on Superfluid, right?
Yeah, so when I was talking about cash flow advances, yes, you would first need to have on-chain cash flows, which obviously that's the first step, right? When we have the on-chain cash flows, then we can start thinking about financing and other things.
And then the second question, building up on that, let's think about the case of Netflix. What would be the motivation for Netflix to switch to a stream-based cash flow instead of a projected full charge of a whole month? Do you think the service suppliers would be switching to this kind of process since it doesn't seem as profitable as the current one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what I can tell you is so far, we have spoken to a lot of people who think it's actually better. There are different reasons. One is the lower barrier to access. The other is the fact that they don't have to deal with credit card charges, failed transactions. They don't have to even deal with credit card companies at all. We don't charge any fees, right? So there is that 2-3% charge that debit cards have. At the same time, I don't honestly think that Superfluid streams are a 10x improvement on traditional recurring payments in of themselves. I think they become a 10x improvement when you couple them with other interesting things on chain, right? And that's the same with payments, right? I don't think a stablecoin payment is 10 times better than a bank payment. But if that stablecoin payment enables you to directly deposit the funds into a savings account, while you couldn't do that with fiat, then it becomes better, right? So the reasons I'm very excited about bringing cash flows on chain, right? So bringing these subscriptions on chain is that then we can build these, for example, loan protocols that will give you a loan based on your cash flows, right? Or There's a lot of actually people in our community that are thinking a lot about fidelization, that are thinking about giving customers tokens back for subscribing, right? They're giving NFTs back for subscribing. They're thinking about different ways of doing referral marketing directly built into the streams. So I think when adopting streams as a way to pay for subscriptions means you get access to additional services, then it becomes 10 times better. Until then, I think it's simply a novelty, but it's still a very cool novelty. So I think we will get some people to adopt it before the kind of other pieces are there.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you're currently available on Polygon and XDAI. Are you going to be also launching on Ethereum mainnet, or are you already there as well?
We will be launching on Ethereum mainnet, but Ethereum mainnet is very expensive.
Yeah.
So making a payment on mainnet, even with Superfluid, where you literally only have to pay once and then the payment goes forever, is still expensive. And people generally, when making payments, so the way I kind of like to frame this is, if you're buying a token on Uniswap and you think that token is going to go 10x, you don't care if you pay a lot of gas fees. But if you're paying something, and to pay for something, you have to pay even more because the gas fees are there, it just doesn't really work economically. So generally, I think payments are better suited for cheaper chains, which is why we're keenly looking at layer 2s. I think layer 1 will be great for Superfluid, but not really for payments as much as for salaries, right? There's a lot of DAOs on mainnet that will, be very interested in using this for paying their employees, for example.
What about other layer 1s like Solana, for example?
Solana is interesting, but haven't really looked into it. Can't comment too much. We'll see. I think other layer 1s that are not EVM based are still very early. It's hard to predict if there will be any activity. And ultimately, Superfluid is not useful for speculating. It's useful for actual kind of economic activity, right? So paying people, paying for products, paying for services. So if those chains don't kind of develop an organic economy, then Superfluid is simply not that useful there.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. And then there's a question, is your company registered in the UK? How do you deal with cross-border regulations, i.e. tax, if this is applicable?
We are incorporated in the UK. I'm not sure what you mean with cross-border regulations. We are not regulated in the sense that we don't process any payments. We're simply writing the protocol. So we don't deal with them, if that's an answer. I mean, our company has people that we employ in other countries, and we do everything like it has to be done, but the protocol itself is not operated by us.
So presumably someone who uses Stream to pay salaries would have to think about how they can pay payroll tax, for example. So that someone could build almost an application on top that helps with the tax calculation as well.
You mentioned, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's actually so there's 2 community applications, and there's 3 kind of other crypto protocols we're talking to who are working on figuring out accounting and taxation. It's very tricky. Like, you're not going to find a tax law anywhere in the world that explains to you how to pay for taxes in streams. Like, it's just not a thing, right? So we're still learning, and we'll see kind of where the best practices fall.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then there's a question, what is the process to unwrap the Superfluid token? Is there a second gas fee involved?
Yes, correct. So the rule of thumb is that you have to pay gas on chain every time you change the state. So every time you change kind of the blockchain state, then you have to pay gas. And the reason streams don't change the state is because when you open a stream, you're simply saying how much you will pay. And that amount you will pay doesn't change. So you don't need gas over time. But the moment you change that, so for example, I'm paying Oleg, $1 a day, and then I switch that to paying $0 a day, then I pay again, right? Because I'm changing that piece of information on chain.
And then there's a question, I think this will eventually require a cross-chain solution to pay for different assets or tokenized services. I'm not sure if Polygon has it, but do you have any plans for cross-chain transactions?
Yeah, this is fascinating. I think about this all the time. So the way I see it in the future, we will have people like at the moment, I don't know about you guys, but for example, us as a company, we manage assets on 3 different chains, right? And this is really complicated, cumbersome, and something we would much prefer to avoid. I think in the future, we'll be able to not do this by simply choosing a chain where we keep our assets, and then through cross-chain solutions, we'll be able to interact with applications on different chains. And this is something that we're working at Superfluid, and we're still at early days of design, but the vision is that you would be able to, for example, hold your assets on a ZK rollup on Ethereum, and then stream your money to Polygon or to Solana, right? And in Solana, maybe you're interacting with an application, or you're paying for a subscription, or even you're paying somebody their salary, right? In a completely different chain and in a completely fluid way. And we have, early designs for this. There's a lot that we still need to figure out, but I think that's the direction we're going into.
Thank you. There isn't any new question, but I did have a question earlier from Cameroon. He asked kind of more about more broadly your views on the market, and let me check what's how best to word it. Your thoughts about exit strategies if the market goes down, or your thoughts on things like yield farming. So kind of a more broad question.
I mean, it's fun. Yield farming is fun. It's a good meme. It brought a lot of people in because it made, I think the way to think about it is it made finance fun, right? Like, I mean, fintechs are boring, in my opinion. It's not that they're not great products. It's just that they're not as fun, right? Yield farming kind of brought back the fun and spending money, moving it around. It did make a lot of things incalculable, right? So the reason yield farming works is because nobody's able to calculate if they're making or losing money until they kind of realize it, right, at the end. So I think that's kind of why it worked. As people become more sophisticated, the yield farming will have to change to, keep people from understanding what's happening. I think it's great. It's fun. I don't do much of it because I'm working too much and focusing on building. What happens if the market goes down? Well, I mean, there's plenty of options protocols right now, right? So what you should do really is just hedge against that and just find a way to monetize if it does. I think the market's definitely going to go down and then back up and then back down. It's just what it does. That's why having good hedging strategies, I think, is underrated. That said, there's someone in our community working on a streaming hedging platform where you'll be able to basically buy price insurance over time just by kind of sending, say, $100 a month to their protocol, and that will cover you if, for example, Ether's price goes down, right? So I think there's a lot of things in DeFi that can actually make you money if price goes down. So if you think it will, then look into those.
Pretty cool. One maybe last question from my side about security. If you've been thinking about possible attack vectors, is there anything you are worried about or you've discovered like in the past that you guys managed to fix? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's honestly so many different attack vectors for everything we do. I would caution everyone, we are building something very new. We're building something that hasn't really been done before. We don't know what could go wrong. And that's the same with a lot of DeFi stuff, right? You can only assume things are safe because they've been around for a long time and haven't been hacked, right? We haven't been around a long time and we haven't been hacked. So it's very likely we will get hacked at some point. So I think the way to think about it is, nothing in DeFi is safe. Don't invest too much money in it. And that said, we're we're a serious entity. We're here for the long haul. We'll fix bugs as they come, and we'll do our best to make it safe. We're engaging with some formal verification companies right now, and ultimately code is never safe, but you can do your best, and that's what we're aiming for.
Fantastic, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so if anyone has any questions, now is your last chance. If not, Caitlin, Larry, Devon, anything from you guys to add, or any questions?
No, I don't have any, I guess, like last questions from my side. I guess there was somebody who asked at the beginning if there was any general discussion as well. So if you guys have any like general crypto discussions or latest news, happy to hear what's on your guys' mind. Yeah,
there was the question from Cameroon about the market that I read out. He sent it to me privately.
Where's the market going?
Yeah, well, I wish I would know. Yeah, at least the NFTs seem to have topped out.
You think they've topped out?
It's gone the last like 40 hours or so. It's gone down pretty bad, but maybe that means that DeFi will go up again. You never know with crypto. It's like one hype cycle after the other.
Yeah, but what's the next meme? That's the burning question, right? We've had DeFi, we've had NFTs. What's next?
Yeah, what's next? Now it's gonna be yeah. Sorry, go
DAOs. We're seeing like a lot of people asking us about turning things into DAOs now. We just released quite recently, a couple of months ago, Vita DAO, and now more recently, Shapeshift have turned themselves into a DAO. Seems to be a trend. I think Consensus is also looking into more DAO type infrastructure now as well.
Yeah. Is anyone in here part of any DAOs?
I'm part of the Bankless DAO, but I'm not really involved in it. Just
not really involved. Yeah.
Passive member. The problem is that we have no time when we are running companies. You can either be in a DAO or you can run a company, basically.
I don't understand people who are in like 4 or 5 DAOs, and I'm like, how can you possibly have the time for that?
Literally, like I'm barely able to read like one Discord properly, There's one question about your fundraising. If you want to give an update like about the fundraising round, and it's quite impressive that you guys raised 9 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's what can I say about it? It took a while to find the right partners and people who saw beyond a specific use case. That was one of the things that we were kind of most adamant about, right? We don't know what this is useful for. We have some ideas, we have some initial kind of hints at product market fit, but we don't really know where it's going to go or what it's going to be used for. And finding investors that are comfortable with that is not easy, right? Usually, the most common questions you get in a kind of traditional startup would be, who are your customers? What's product market fit? When are you going to make revenues, right? And we don't have any answers for any of those questions. So finding investors that were visionary enough to say, this is cool, we really want this to succeed, even though you haven't figured anything out yet, was the hardest part. But, it went well. So we're happy with that. So yeah, if you want to see some investors that kind of are generally very high risk investors, you can look at our cap table.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Balazs Srinivasan, so congrats on having him on board.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. He's the typical person I'm talking about, right? He's a complete visionary living in the future. Doesn't really seem too concerned about making or losing money, but rather spending money to make his vision of the future happen. And I think that's we need more people like that.
No, for sure. Any more questions, comments, thoughts from anyone? Otherwise, I think we will call it a day. Caitlin, Larry, any last comments?
Thank you, Francesco. That was really interesting from my perspective, definitely.
Thank you. So thank you. Thank you so much, Francesco. And yeah, best of luck. It's a long journey.
Yeah, thanks, Francesco. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We will going to be trying to post more details about upcoming speakers in advance. It's the problem is often just trying to pin people down for that Monday night. So as and when we do it, we will make sure everybody's notified. Make sure you look at the Telegram group, make sure you look at the meetup messages, and we will be in touch. But again, thanks everybody. And Francesco, that was, I found that really interesting. It was an area I didn't really know much about, and congrats with your company. It's no small feat to raise money nowadays, even in an active market. So well done.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who is listening. And yeah, if anybody's interested in following up the conversation, I'm actually in the CryptoMonday London Telegram group, so you can find
fantastic. Okay,
and
great.
Yeah, great to meet everyone. And maybe last question from me would be to Cameron. What do you think about the market?
Oh, he's muted like everyone, so he will.
No, but he can. Cameron, unmute.
I can unmute him. No.
There you go.
Francesco, yes, thank you for speaking with us. Obviously, I do think the market is going to downturn, as we're all probably aware that it's a 4-year approximate cycle. And so for someone who's just a recent investor, and I do believe in the space, I've got that same bug when you start learning a bit about Bitcoin and crypto, that you just want to keep diving deeper into the rabbit hole, so to speak. And although I do believe in it long term, and I do want to hold on to what I have because I believe in the projects, I also want to retain my value and potentially gain more. As we know, previous drops have been 80-85% from their peaks, and so I don't want to be the last person holding the bag, so to say, when it does drop. And so I want to better understand the types of metrics you might be using to formulate an exit strategy, such as the realized hodl wave, or other metrics that you might be able to give us further insight on.
Yeah, I don't really honestly trade much, so I can't really comment to that. I would say one thing I think sometimes people miss. I didn't used to look at this at all before getting kind of deeper into space, is the fact that there's a lot of people building stuff that you don't know of, right? Like, so for example, we just got funding, right? But actually we got funding a while ago, and we've been working on this for a while, right? Now, if you go and look at fundraising announcements, these past 3 or 4 months have been completely off the charts with regards to venture capital investment. And what this means is, in the next 6 to 12 months, all of those companies are gonna basically start creating products. And all of those companies are going to be extremely well positioned to invest a lot of money into marketing and user acquisition. So, and to kind of give a bit more color to that, a lot of those companies are working on the NFT space, which is very retail oriented. So I wouldn't be surprised if, during the autumn or during the winter, we start seeing product launches like we've never seen before in retail-oriented products. So I'm not bearish at all.
That's very interesting. I think that's useful insight. Definitely. It is interesting. One of the things I've noticed is I meet more and more people like yourself and Oleg and Devin, and people who are running businesses and developing product. Very, very few of them actually invest in the space personally, in terms of into crypto. And I find that's an interesting, to me, it's a bit of a dichotomy, that the people who probably know it best, who are entrenched in it and live it, are, whether they're wary or they just not interested in investing in that space, I don't know, but I find it quite interesting.
I'm not sure I would agree. I mean, I would say something like 80-90% of my net worth is in crypto. It's just, I don't necessarily consider that investing. I mean, like I sometimes do trade and invest actively, but then most of the time I don't really have time for it. So I have my funds like mostly around various DeFi projects where, you know, I'm either farming, providing liquidity, you know, or the various passive income strategies. And that's pretty much where I've got my crypto exposure. But generally, like I'm definitely have like the majority really of my net worth in it. So I'm
So
fully committed.
That's interesting to hear. I mean, because we've never really talked about it. But it's, to me then, at least from the people I've talked to, you're the exception rather than the rule. But maybe I haven't talked to enough people to get a broad enough consensus on that.
Cool.
Francesco, thanks again.
Thank you, Francesco, and thanks everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Good luck,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Chat to you all soon. Bye.